The Washington Post is walking back claims that former President Trump told Georgia's election investigator to, quote, find the fraud. They admit the article falsified quotes attributed to Trump, but issued no apology. The fence surrounding the Capitol building is set to come down soon. The Senate Sergeant at Arms saying there is no credible threat that warrants using it any longer. And questions if the U.S. military has become politicized. This after many members criticized Fox News commentator Tucker Carlson while in uniform, sparking debate. Tune in to Deep Dive as we explore these topics and more. Hello and welcome. This is Deep Dive and I'm Tiffany Meier. Georgia found itself in the spotlight during the 2020 presidential election, and now it's back under scrutiny. The Washington Post is walking back claims that former President Trump told Georgia's elections investigator to, quote, find the fraud. The outlet says in a correction that Trump did not tell the investigator to find the fraud or say she would be a national hero if she did so. It issued a correction on March 11th to a story it published in January. It said the original story about the call included quotes that did not exist in the audio recording. Instead, Trump urged the investigator to scrutinize Fulton County, where he said they would find dishonesty. According to Georgia Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger and his officials, Fulton County had many issues during the 2020 election. A number of Democrats used those quotes to push for Trump's impeachment. The Washington Post said the recording revealed that the Post misquoted Trump's comments on the call based on information provided by a source. CNN, Reuters, ABC, NBC, and the Associated Press also reported those quotes, citing a single anonymous source. As of today, only CNN updated its article, saying the earlier version had a paraphrasing of Trump's comments. Critics say this illustrates the severe problem with the media's lack of accountability. Mark Hemingway, a senior writer at Real Clear Investigation, said this mistake is beyond serious for corporate media that, quote, insists they are the ones holding the line on the truth, while others, like MSNBC writer Hayes Brown, say corrections are good, and what would be corrupt is if they never issued a correction. Some say that while the specific quote was not accurate, the overall narrative that Trump pressured election officials stands true. Trump has since responded, saying he appreciates the Washington Post's correction, but that the original story was a hoax right from the beginning. In his lengthy response, Trump says he'd also appreciate further investigation into Fulton County. And that might just happen. A judge in Georgia may allow inspection of absentee ballots in Fulton County. Voter watchdogs may finally get to see absentee ballots from Fulton County. Georgia Superior Court Judge Brian Amaro says he's inclined to release the ballots to investigators. Voting integrity advocates sued to see the ballots. They say that fraud and irregularities occurred in Fulton County during the 2020 election. A video from Fulton County shows workers counting ballots late into the night after observers left. Observers say they were told to leave by election officials. Georgia election officials deny that happened. Van Hutton Pulitzer testified in the Georgia legislature following the 2020 election. He says viewing the paper ballots is the key to finding out if there was fraud or not. Amaro says he wants the process to shed light and dispel rumors. He says he won't sign the order until the integrity of the ballots is assured, saying the inspection may start in April. And now let's turn to the nation's capital. The fence surrounding the Capitol building will start coming down next week. The Senate Sergeant at Arms said today that there is no credible threat that warrants using it any longer. The fence has drawn controversy for weeks from lawmakers on both sides of the aisle. One Democrat congresswoman from D.C., Representative Eleanor Holmes Norton, even introduced a bill to prohibit federal funds from paying for a permanent fence around Capitol Hill. The fence currently costs about $1.2 million per week. Starting Monday, the razor wire will be taken down and new positioning will allow pedestrian access. But fencing will remain around Capitol Square. As for the National Guard stationed there, they'll begin to return to their home bases in the coming weeks. Representative Ted Budd called it a step in the right direction. He said in a statement, "I continue to believe that permanent fencing around the Capitol itself should also be removed, and our National Guard troops should be sent home to their families." Budd has been especially vocal in calling on House Speaker Nancy Pelosi to take down the fence. and to send the Guard home, and to reopen the Capitol complex to the public. Speaking of the National Guard, let's turn to the U.S. military, which is feeling the heat over comments online. House GOP leader Representative Kevin McCarthy is calling for an end to what he says is the politicizing of the military. He writes on social media, uniformed service members recently criticized a private citizen for his First Amendment rights. Today, a Democratic lawmaker used soldiers in a political stunt against a GOP member, adding this sets a dangerous precedent. It must stop now. He also tagged Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin in the post. So, what set these actions in motion? Let's go back to March 8th, which celebrated International Women's Day. On that day, President Biden marked the occasion by nominating 2 women for 4-star command positions. He also said, quote, "We are making good progress designing body armor that fits women properly, such as tailoring combat uniforms for women and creating maternity flight suits." Fox News commentator Tucker Carlson responded the next day on his show, saying, quote, "So we've got new hairstyles and maternity flight suits. Pregnant women are going to fight our wars. It is a mockery of the U.S. military."
Mockery of the U.S. military.
He contrasted it with how the Chinese Communist Party, or CCP, is expanding its military. Carlson went on to note, a Chinese official says Chinese men are becoming too feminine, saying there's a masculinity crisis. The Chinese regime plans to make their men more masculine. Carlson also noted the Chinese regime now has the world's largest navy. He goes on to ask how the U.S. is responding to that threat. He played a clip from Biden's speech celebrating the diversity in the U.S. military. And then he commented saying, "So we've got new hairstyles and maternity flight suits. Pregnant women are gonna fight our wars. It's a mockery of the U.S. military. While China's military becomes more masculine as it assembles the world's largest navy, our military needs to become, as Joe Biden says, more feminine. Whatever that means anymore, since men and women no longer exist." The bottom line is it is out of control, and the Pentagon is going along with this. This is a mockery of the U.S. military. And then the military got involved. The official account for the U.S. Marine Corps for the 2nd Marine Expeditionary Force Information Group shared a picture of a female soldier carrying a male one and tagged Carlson, writing, "What it looks like in today's armed forces. Get right before you get left, boomer." The tweet got mixed responses. Some praised it for supporting women in uniform. Others found it unprofessional. One person wrote, "Please focus on China and not Tucker Carlson." The account responded by saying, "Come back when you've served and been pregnant." The user then went on to say, "Please focus on China and not me." The account has since deleted those tweets. But it wasn't just this group that went after Tucker Carlson. The Space Force Command senior enlisted leader, Marine Corps Master Gunnery Sergeant Scott Stalker, said in a video that Carlson's opinion is, quote, "based on 0 days of service in the armed forces." He interpreted Carlson's comments to mean that pregnant women in the military make it less lethal, less fit, and less ready. He said the military allows female troops to have more time with their children, to recuperate, to get fit and ready, to take that time that's necessary that our medical professionals know that's needed, which actually makes us a more lethal, ready, and fit force. Stalker appeared to be wearing his uniform. Carlson's comments drew fire from the Pentagon Press Secretary John Kirby, who told reporters that the diversity of our military is one of our greatest strengths. Kirby also wrote a statement saying Press Secretary smites Fox host that dissed diversity in U.S. military. He wrote, "We are better and more effective not only when we represent the American people, all the American people, but also when we have the moral courage to include other perspectives and ideas into our decision-making. Perspectives that, as the Secretary himself noted Monday, are based on lived experience. It's that experience and the professionalism and commitment of our people that has always been our decisive advantage." He said, adding that the U.S. Armed Forces need to work on making the military more inclusive. He went on to say Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin shares the revulsion of so many others of what Mr. Carlson said in his opening statement. Tucker Carlson then responded by saying the Pentagon had effectively declared war on a domestic news operation. He also amped up his critique of what he described as the military's focus on identity politics, noting that Biden recently announced the Pentagon would pay for gender reassignment surgery for active duty personnel. Carlson went on to ask, how do sex changes in the military make this country safer? That's not a trick question. It's not another volley in the culture war. It's the only question that matters, literally the only question that matters. But no one bothered to ask it, probably because no one can remember why the U.S. military exists. Carlson went on to say, here's a reminder, the U.S. military exists to fight and win wars. That's its only purpose. The U.S. military is not an NGO. It is not a vehicle for achieving equity. It's not a social experiment. It's definitely not an employment agency. Nobody has a God-given right to work in the military. No one does, and that includes all of us. He says every American has a right, maybe a duty, to know what the military they pay for is doing, because our lives may depend on it. Senator Ted Cruz also weighed in, saying he's requesting a meeting with the head of the Marine Corps after the Marines joined in the attacks. He wrote, quote, under Biden, the military is launching political attacks to intimidate Tucker Carlson, other civilians who criticize their policy decisions, adding officials in uniform are being used for the campaign. He went on to say, I have demanded a meeting with a commandment of the USMC to put a stop to it. Cruz went on to note the slew of unusual statements from the military, including the Space Force Command Sergeant Stalker and Defense Department spokesman Kirby's statement. Cruz told Austin in a letter that he is deeply troubled by the situation, accusing the Pentagon of mobilizing systematic public attacks against Carlson. Cruz then stated that this spectacle risks politicizing the military after several centuries of efforts to keep military officials out of domestic affairs, and undermines civil-military relations by having the military take a side in a contentious cultural dispute. He went on to say such behavior is more akin to what occurs in a third world country rather than the United States. The USMC has since issued a string of apologies, writing, we are human and we messed up. What was intended as a tweet in support of our female Marines and sisters serving in uniform was clearly not aligned with our standard practices or an appropriate representation of the Marine Corps. We will do better and serve the people. Adding, our intentions were misinterpreted and we are working to move forward from this mistake. They went on to say, we have strayed away from our brand and realize that. Our standard practices will be in effect and you can count on us to correct our mistakes going forward. So why the controversy? The military is forbidden from getting involved in politics while in uniform. But several members criticized Tucker Carlson while in uniform. Many people then criticized them, arguing they should stay out of domestic, political, and cultural affairs. But what do you think? Let me know below. Thanks for tuning in to Deep Dive. I'm Tiffany Meier, and see you soon.